Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Carney, and I thought we'd say a few words about philosophers that we're going to be discussing this winter session. There are two philosophers who are particularly well suited, I think, for the dark and cold evenings of a winter session. Both of them are modern philosophers in the sense that uh, both of them have kind of overturned previous categories in philosophy. The first is Thomas Hobbes, whose major work was Leviathan. And the second philosopher, we'll probably spend a little bit more time on him in this discussion, is René Descartes. Now, what's interesting about both Hobbes and Descartes, I think, is what's not in their philosophy. In the case of these two philosophers, God is present, but not used as a justification, as a reason for our thoughts. The second element that's missing in both of these philosophies is the idea of divine right, so to speak. That's something that's more prevalent in the works of Thomas Hobbes. Both Descartes and Thomas Hobbes are also logicians. So they want to present their work, and that work is going to be evidence-based. They want to put it out there, and tremendous belief in reason. If you kind of have the same experience as they do, then you should assent to their conclusion. One example, for example, Thomas Hobbes, in the course of Leviathan, makes a famous depiction of how aggressive and how warlike we are when left to our instincts. And he asks us, he says, well, look, when you go abroad, do you not prepare for your own safety? Do you not, protect yourself at night when you go to sleep? And of course, so there's a very strong reliance on evidence in both the case of Descartes and Thomas Hobbes. Turning to Descartes, his primary concern is really the human condition, really, I guess you would say. Descartes was struck by the fact that so many of our ideas seem to get us into trouble, get us into difficulty. And he wanted to know, why is that? How is it possible that we get ourselves into such difficulty? He was struck by the security that one has when one is doing mathematics, for example, or geometry. There just doesn't seem to be the same possibility for error. We can be mistaken in how we carry out the calculations, but the calculations are by and large correct. And so he wanted to see if there was a foundation, some foundational idea, sort of like an Archimedean point from which he could develop his philosophy. And oddly enough, he begins with the thing that bedeviled him to begin with, which is doubt. How can we be sure that what we know is certain? So he introduces an interesting device, not unlike some of the devices that Thomas Hobbes used. For example, Thomas Hobbes used the device of the social contract and the state of nature in order to make his argument. So too in René Descartes we find the device of the evil genius is introduced. Not that he thinks that the evil genius exists, but says, look, let's suppose that there's an evil genius that's deceiving me. If that's the case, what can I be sure about? So it begins with his senses, sense knowledge, and similarly to Plato, he has a very kind of a dim view of sense evidence-based evidence. It can be doubted. We're wrong about the senses all the time. And to that, he adds the ideas we receive in our upbringing. I guess today sociologists would refer to this generally as the socialization process, the ideas and attitudes, beliefs we receive growing up. Well, Descartes, similarly, he says, well, these might be fine, but there's cause to doubt them. They're not certain. And so what is it that we really can be certain about? And he's going through his systematic doubt. Is there something like mathematics, he wants to know, that gives us that level of certainty? And then he stumbles upon it. And what's wonderful about the meditations on first philosophy is you can actually sense his struggle through this. And it's written in very wonderful prose, very accessible, even in translation. And he says, look, there's something I can't doubt. And that is, I can't doubt that I'm doubting. I can doubt my body. The evil genius might be deceiving me about that, but I can't really doubt that I'm doubting. So I must be thinking. And then his final famous output of this reflection is cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. And then in one felt swoop, we have entered both feet into the modern era. The thinking subject occurs now for the first time. And the thinking subject is different. It's now the thinking subject, consciousness itself, that is the most secure aspect of the human condition, at least when it comes to knowledge. What a paradox that is. I mean, what could be more certain than the objective world, it would seem? Yet, the objective world doesn't have the same kind of certitude that thinking does, our own mind. Now, Plato had earlier noted this in arguing that, physical objects are in some ways not as real as the forms of those physical objects. But this is different in Descartes. The individual subject can guarantee that we can be free of error. Subsequently, Descartes will go on in some of his other meditations to consider the existence of God. And in those considerations, he's most interested in the idea of perfection. And we'll turn to that a little bit later. But I do want to keep with this idea of consciousness, because it is a breakthrough in philosophy, and it's probably his greatest legacy, that the thinking subject can observe everything and pass judgment on its veracity. And so, we can be sure of our ideas if they have this seminal mark that we see in cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. And those two seminal marks are the ideas clear and are they distinct? Are they evidence-based? And by evidence, remember now, he's not talking necessarily about physical evidence from the senses. He's talking about evidence more the way geometers would talk about evidence, something which is almost a priori in its certitude. So consciousness will spend a good deal more time talking about what Descartes does represent a page turn in the development of philosophy. So there you have it. We have an English philosopher, Thomas Hobbes, kind of overturning everything that went before him, divine right and natural law. And we have also, in the case of René Descartes, an overturning of the monism of the human person, establishing instead the central role of human consciousness. Both Thomas Hobbes and René Descartes will have their detractors going forward, and oddly enough, they will be French and English in turn. Descartes will be met with objections by Immanuel Kant, the German, and Thomas Hobbes will be met with the objections of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So, I hope you enjoyed this introduction to René Descartes and modern philosophy, and we'll continue our discussions as we go forward.